Chapter 1, The Impossible Planet. The first mistake was believing the survey probe had malfunctioned. Senior xenobiologist Terksal stood beneath the great projection dome of the Galactic Academy while nearly 300 cadets waited for the lecture to begin. Behind him floated a slowly rotating blue sphere. It looked harmless. Vast oceans, white cloud bands, green continents. Nothing about it suggested danger. Nothing about it suggested uniqueness. This, Terk began, is Sol 3. A student raised an appendage. The human homeworld. Correct. Another student leaned forward. The death world. Terk smiled faintly. No. Confused murmurs spread through the lecture hall. The student blinked. It is. It is dangerous. Terk enlarged the image until an entire continent filled the dome. But danger is not what makes it unusual. The display shifted. Golden sand spread to every horizon. Temperatures exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. Rain sometimes failed to arrive for years. A single label appeared. Desert biome. A second image replaced it. Towering trees disappeared into clouds. Rain fell nearly every afternoon. Humidity approached saturation. Thousands of species competed for every meter of ground. Tropical rainforest, then another. Ice stretched beyond sight. Winter temperatures reached -50. The sun vanished for months. Polar tundra, then mountains, then wetlands, then endless grasslands, then coral reefs, then temperate forests, then volcanic islands. The images continued. One after another. None resembled the last. A cadet finally interrupted. I understand. Terk looked at him. You do. These are examples from different member worlds. Terk folded his hands behind his back. No. The hall grew quiet. Another student frowned. They are neighboring planets. No. Colonies. No. A longer silence. Finally, someone laughed. Professor. The student pointed toward the projection. Those climates cannot exist together. Terk did not answer. Instead, he changed the scale. The projection zoomed outward. The rainforest shrank. The desert remained visible. The glacier appeared near the top of the globe. A mountain chain crossed the center. The coral reefs outlined entire coastlines. Every image from the lecture occupied the same planet. The laughter stopped. A different cadet spoke carefully. Those environments touch each other. In many cases. Without planetary engineering. Yes. No environmental stabilization. None. The student's crest slowly lowered. That would make predicting local conditions extremely difficult. It does. Another hand rose. Surely intelligent life evolved in only one of them. Terk nodded. An excellent assumption. The projection changed again. This time it showed colored markers scattered across every continent. Thousands of them. Each represented one of humanity's oldest known population centers and civilizations. Some emerged in deserts, others beside frozen seas, others in mountain valleys, others in dense forests. Others across open grasslands. One civilization sailed among islands. Another crossed vast tundra. Another built cities where seasonal rivers appeared and vanished. The cadets stared. They evolved. Everywhere. Terk inclined his head. Yes. The lecture hall remained unusually quiet. Most students at the academy specialized in xenobiology. They understood evolution. They understood adaptation. Species became extraordinarily good at surviving one environment because that environment remained relatively stable over millions of years. That was how life worked, until Earth. A student from the pelagic worlds finally spoke. My people evolved beneath shallow oceans. Terk nodded. You did. Our architecture reflects shallow oceans. Yes. Our transportation. Yes. Our agriculture. Yes. Our physiology. Yes. The student looked back toward Earth. If we were born on that world. He hesitated. Which environment would shape us? Terk smiled. That question occupied xenobiologists for nearly 40 years. And we eventually realized it had no answer. Another image appeared, not of geography, of weather. A spiral storm larger than entire nations rotated slowly above one ocean. Category 5 hurricane. Before anyone could study it, the display changed again. A wall of fire raced across dry grasslands. Seasonal wildfire, another. A river overflowing its banks. Flood, another. A mountain shaking itself apart. earthquake, another, snow. Then drought, then volcanic ash, then tornadoes, then landslides. The disasters came so quickly the students struggled to follow them. Finally, one cadet asked the obvious question: when did these occur? Terk answered, the same geological era. The student's eyes widened. Over thousands of years. No. Hundreds. No. Terk enlarged the timeline. Some disasters were separated by months, others by weeks. A hurricane struck one continent while another endured drought. Wildfires consumed forests while blizzards buried mountain villages. Floods destroyed cities as volcanoes darkened skies elsewhere. The room became silent again. One student slowly stood. Professor. His voice carried genuine uncertainty. How did the humans survive? Terk considered the question, then he surprised everyone. They didn't. Confusion spread immediately. Several students looked back toward the title of the lecture. One finally pointed toward the projection. But humanity obviously survived. Humanity did. Terk looked around the room. Individual civilizations often did not. The display changed again. Ancient settlements appeared, then vanished. Cities abandoned after drought. Kingdoms consumed by volcanic eruptions. Communities buried beneath earthquakes. Cultures driven from coastlines by rising seas. Entire populations migrated when climates changed beyond recognition. For the first time that morning, Earth no longer looked invincible. It looked exhausting. Our earliest conclusion, Terk said quietly, was that humans were exceptionally resilient. He paused. It was wrong. Another pause. They were exceptionally adaptable. He walked toward the projection until the blue world hung directly behind him. A desert civilization failed. Another image appeared. The survivors moved to grasslands. That image faded. A coastal settlement disappeared. Another replaced it. Its descendants built mountain cities. Again, a northern kingdom collapsed. Another. Its people crossed oceans. The transitions continued. Failure, movement, adaptation, failure, movement, adaptation. Over thousands of years, the pattern repeated so often that one realization became impossible to ignore. Earth had never allowed humanity to master a single environment. It had demanded they learn another, and another, and another. Terk let the globe rotate slowly. Most intelligent species inherited one world. His voice echoed through the silent hall. The humans inherited all of them. No one raised another question. Because for the first time in the history of the Academy, the students were no longer wondering how humans had survived Earth. They were wondering what kind of civilization emerged when the planet itself never stopped changing. Chapter 2, A Planet That Refused to Cooperate. The lecture should have ended there. Most introductory courses did. Present the anomaly, answer a few questions, assign the reading. Instead, senior xenobiologist Terk Saul dimmed the projection until only Earth remained suspended above the center of the hall. The second mistake, he said, was believing Earth produced many specialists. Several cadets exchanged puzzled glances. Did it not? One finally asked. Terk smiled. It produced specialists. He rotated the globe slowly. They simply refused to remain specialists. The projection descended toward a vast yellow desert. A human settlement appeared along the edge of a winding river. Ancient irrigation channels spread across the sand. Stone architecture, seasonal agriculture, engineered flood control. A civilization perfectly adapted to a river desert. The students nodded. That made sense. Every species developed techniques appropriate for its home. Then the image shifted, not hundreds of kilometers, thousands. Snow-covered mountains filled the projection. A different human civilization appeared. Terraced farms clung impossibly to steep slopes. Stone roads crossed mountain passes that disappeared beneath winter snow. Another adaptation, another solution, another civilization, then forests, then islands, then frozen coastlines. Every region showed humans solving different problems. One cadet finally spoke. So humanity evolved separately. No. They became different species. No. They were isolated for millions of years. No. The room grew quiet. Terk expanded the timeline. It stretched across thousands of years. Colored lines began moving. They crossed continents, crossed oceans, crossed mountain ranges, crossed deserts. The lines merged, separated, merged again. "What are those?" a student asked. "Migrations." The colored lines multiplied until they covered the planet. When conditions changed, people moved. A drought appeared across one continent. The lines shifted. When kingdoms collapsed, people moved. Another image, a volcanic eruption. Ash darkened the sky. The colored lines changed direction again. People moved. One of the engineering cadets frowned. They abandoned optimized environments. Frequently. That is irrational. Tarek shook his head. It is expensive. He enlarged one migration. Thousands of people crossing mountains with livestock, tools, children, and everything they owned. It is dangerous. The line continued. It is exhausting. Finally, a new settlement appeared, but sometimes staying is worse. Another student leaned forward. My species has lived in the same reef system for nearly 80,000 years. An extraordinary achievement. We have never abandoned it. You never needed to. The student looked back toward Earth. They needed to repeatedly. They did. The projection zoomed toward North America. Ice covered much of the continent, then slowly retreated. Forests expanded. Grasslands followed. Human settlements shifted with the changing climate. Again and again and again, civilizations appeared, disappeared. Returned, the cadence repeated so often that several students stopped trying to count. One finally whispered, "The planet keeps moving." Tarek nodded. The coastlines changed. The image demonstrated. The rivers changed. Another, the forests changed. Again, the climate changed. Again, the available food changed. Again, the predators changed. Another, the diseases changed. The student stared at the display. When did humans finally receive a stable environment? Tarek answered without hesitation. They never did. The room became noticeably quieter, not because Earth seemed more dangerous, because it seemed inconvenient. Every civilization represented in the Academy had eventually reached equilibrium with its world. Earth never appeared interested in equilibrium. It changed, constantly, sometimes slowly, sometimes violently, always enough that the previous solution eventually became insufficient. A cadet from the Ice Consortium raised a cautious hand. My people train for blizzards. Naturally. Our children learn survival before mathematics. An admirable priority. The cadet hesitated. What do human children study? Laughter spread through the room. It was an absurd question. Surely they learned the survival techniques appropriate to their own homeland. Tarek surprised them again. It depends. On what? Where they live. He touched the projection. Children from northern settlements learned cold weather survival. Desert children learned water conservation. Island children learned navigation. Mountain children learned avalanche awareness. Forest children learned wildfire evacuation. Coastal children learned hurricanes. River communities learned floods. Earthquake zones practiced evacuation drills. Volcanic regions monitored ash clouds. One curriculum, hundreds of variations, a cadet frowned. So there is no standard. There is. What is it? Tarek looked around the lecture hall. The answer appeared as a single sentence above the planet. Learn the environment you are in. Nothing more, nothing less. One student finally understood. I think we have been asking the wrong question. Tarek looked pleased. What question? How did humans survive every environment? And the student studied the rotating Earth. They didn't. No. They survived whichever environment they happened to be standing in. A smile spread across Tarek's face. For a while. The student blinked. For a while. The environment eventually changed. Realization spread through the room. Humans had never conquered deserts, or forests, or mountains, or oceans, or ice. They simply kept learning the next one. Tarek dismissed every projection except the blue planet itself. Most civilizations, he said quietly, built one instruction manual for one world. He let the silence settle. Humanity built a library. The globe continued turning. Clouds drifted across continents. Storms formed, storms vanished. Snow advanced, forests retreated, rivers flooded, volcanoes smoked. Nothing about Earth remained perfectly still. For the first time, the cadets understood why human maps were constantly being updated. It was not because humans enjoyed exploration. It was because their planet refused to stop rewriting itself. And a civilization raised on a world that never stopped changing eventually learned a lesson every other species had overlooked. The environment was never the constant. Adaptation was. Chapter 3, The Generalists. The lecture hall emptied slowly, not because the cadets had more questions, because none of them were certain what questions remained. Earth had already violated nearly every assumption taught during their first year at the academy. One dominant ecosystem, one dominant adaptation, one dominant civilization. The human homeworld possessed none of them. Senior xenobiologist Terk Saul watched the students leave until only a handful remained. One of them finally spoke. Professor. Yes. If humans adapted to every environment, what became their specialty? Terk smiled. An excellent question. He dimmed the lights once more. I'll show you. The projection changed, not to Earth, to recruitment advertisements. Dozens of them, one from the Polar Consortium, seeking cold environment engineers, another deep ocean structural specialists, another high-gravity construction corps, another desert resource extraction. The advertisements continued. Each civilization sought experts for the environment it understood best. No one found that unusual. Then a human recruitment notice appeared. The room frowned. Field operations, environmental adaptation division, qualifications. Experience in multiple climates preferred, problem-solving under changing conditions required, willingness to relocate. One cadet looked confused. There is no environment listed. There is. How do applicants know what they are applying for? Terk answered simply. They don't. The next image appeared. One human, 30 years of service, assignments. Arctic Research Station, Mountain Search and Rescue, Tropical Disease Response, Flood Engineering, Desert Logistics, Wildfire Command, Disaster Relief. The cadets stared. He changed careers. No. He changed professions. No. He changed. The student stopped. Terk nodded. He changed environments. Another file appeared. A woman, marine biology, later mountain conservation, later emergency management. Later agricultural planning, later urban disaster response. Another, military engineering, then Arctic infrastructure, then jungle logistics, then earthquake recovery, then orbital construction. The room became increasingly uncomfortable. A student finally blurted, they are not specialists. No. They're adequate at many things. Terk smiled, better than adequate. He opened another display. A simple chart, no species names, no explanations, only performance rankings, frozen environment. Humans 4th, desert survival. Humans 5th, mountain operations. Humans 3rd, deep forest. Humans 6th, ocean logistics. Humans 4th, no first places, not one. A cadet laughed. So humans really aren't exceptional. They are. Another student frowned. Then why are they assigned everywhere? Terk enlarged the graph. Each category remained. Then one final line appeared beneath them, combined multi-environment operations. The ranking changed. Humans first, by an enormous margin. Silence settled over the hall. One engineering cadet looked back and forth between the displays. I don't understand. You will. Terk split the screen. On one side stood a desert specialist, on the other a human expedition. The specialist crossed 200 kilometers of open sand faster than anyone in the galaxy. The human team required almost twice as long. No surprise, the display changed. Now both groups entered dense rainforest. The desert specialist slowed dramatically. Navigation failed. Equipment overheated, visibility disappeared. The human team slowed too, but much less. The display changed again, mountains, then frozen terrain, then coastal marshland. Each transition hurt the specialist. Each transition inconvenienced the humans, nothing more. They keep starting over, one cadet whispered. Terk nodded. Exactly. The specialists lose everything they optimized. Yes. The humans never optimized that much in the first place. Another nod. They optimized something else. The projection dissolved into Earth's history. Thousands of years compressed into minutes. People crossed deserts, then learned forests, then crossed oceans, then climbed mountains, then settled frozen coastlines. Generation after generation inherited techniques from places their ancestors no longer lived. A child born beside tropical rivers might still learn how mountain communities survived avalanches. Someone raised in northern forests might study irrigation developed in ancient deserts. Knowledge rarely stayed where it began. It traveled with people, it accumulated, it overlapped. It became civilization. One cadet slowly stood. My people have no word for this. For what? He searched for the translation. Someone who knows many environments. Terk considered that. The humans do. What is it? The professor smiled. They call them generalists. The translator paused. Several languages struggled with the concept. One finally produced an approximation, one who is useful in many places. Terk nodded, close enough. Another student frowned thoughtfully. We have always believed specialists were superior. They often are. So why do humans keep winning multi-world expeditions? Terk walked beneath the projection of Earth one final time. Because the expedition does not care where you were exceptional yesterday. He looked up at the slowly turning planet. It cares where you can still contribute today. The globe continued to rotate. Above the northern hemisphere, winter storms gathered. Near the equator, tropical clouds formed. Far to the south, glaciers advanced. On Earth, every environment existed at once. Every environment demanded something different. Every environment eventually changed. And somewhere below those clouds, human beings were already packing their bags, not because they preferred uncertainty, because after thousands of years on Earth, they had learned something every other civilization was only beginning to understand. The world would change. So they might as well be ready to change with it. Chapter 4, The Expedition. The first expedition was never intended to prove anything. It was supposed to settle an argument. For nearly a century, the Galactic Survey Authority had debated how to classify newly discovered worlds. The existing system was simple. Every inhabited planet belonged to one environmental category. Ocean, forest, desert, ice, volcanic, temperate, assignments followed naturally. Need an ice colony, send the cryonic core. Need desert infrastructure, send the arid engineering guild. The system had worked for more than 400 years, until Survey World KX-441. The planet refused classification. Initial orbital scans identified vast temperate forests. The Forestry Directorate immediately volunteered. Then deeper scans discovered a mountain chain taller than anything on their own homeworld. The Alpine Consortium requested jurisdiction. Another satellite pass revealed enormous inland deserts, then polar glaciers, then seasonal floodplains. Then volcanic islands, then tropical coastlines, then deep freshwater marshes. By the end of the week, 7 environmental ministries claimed the world belonged to them. None agreed with the others. The Survey Authority chose the obvious solution. It would send one specialist team from every major environmental discipline, along with a small human advisory group. The humans were included almost as an afterthought, mostly because someone suggested they had experience with mixed environments. No one expected them to lead. The expedition landed during early spring. At least that was what the orbital calendar predicted. The first camp went up beside a broad river beneath clear skies. The forestry specialists immediately began cataloging local plant life. The desert engineers surveyed nearby mineral deposits. The mountain core examined distant peaks. Everything proceeded exactly as planned for 4 days. On the 5th, the river flooded, not gradually, violently. Snowmelt from the mountains combined with seasonal storms farther inland. The water rose nearly 4 meters overnight. Half the expedition woke floating. Equipment disappeared downstream. Several temporary laboratories collapsed. No one had predicted it. The forestry specialists protested. This is a forest ecosystem. The human logistics officer looked at the watermarks climbing the trees. It's a floodplain. There is a difference. A very important one. Camp relocated. Higher ground. New shelters. New storage systems. The expedition resumed. 6 days later, the weather changed again. Cold winds descended from the mountains. Nighttime temperatures fell below freezing. Several tropical researchers had packed only light equipment. The Forestry Directorate requested emergency heating units from orbit. The humans unpacked insulated clothing. One cadet stared. You planned for freezing weather. The human shrugged. We planned for weather. Another week passed. The cold ended. Heat followed. Grasslands dried. Natural fires began across the western plains. The fire spread faster than projected. The mountain core argued they should retreat toward the cliffs. The forestry teams wanted to defend the camp. The desert engineers believed the fire would pass harmlessly. Everyone had a solution. Every solution reflected the environment they understood. Every solution ignored the environments they did not. Commander Iller, the expedition leader, called an emergency meeting. Representatives from every division gathered around a digital terrain map. Arguments erupted almost immediately. The forest will recover. The river is the priority. The mountains offer safety. The desert cannot burn. Voices overlapped, charts appeared, predictions conflicted, no consensus emerged. Commander Iller rubbed his temples, then he noticed something strange. The humans were not speaking. They were moving markers around the map. Finally, he looked toward their team leader. "You have no recommendation." The human looked up. "We have several." "Then why haven't you presented them?" "Because we're still figuring out what the planet wants." The room fell silent. Commander Iller frowned. "The planet wants nothing." The human considered that, maybe. She rotated the terrain model, but it keeps changing the questions. She enlarged the map. The river, the mountains, the forest, the grasslands, the approaching fire. None of them were separate, each affected the next. The flood had come from mountain snow. The fire would eventually reach the forest edge. The burned ground would change the next rainy season. The river would move again, everything connected, everything influenced everything else. One forestry scientist stared at the display. "We have been treating these as separate ecosystems." The human nodded. "They are one ecosystem." The scientist blinked. "No." His voice grew quieter. "They are one planet." For the first time since arriving, the expedition stopped assigning problems to specialists. Instead, it assigned specialists to problems. The mountain core calculated runoff. The forestry experts predicted fuel loads. The desert engineers designed water storage. Marine biologists studied river movement. The humans walked between every group, translating one discipline into another. Not because they knew more, because they had spent their entire history living where one environment constantly interrupted another. That evening, Commander Iller stood outside the rebuilt camp. The river had already begun falling. Smoke drifted across the distant horizon. Snow still crowned the mountains. Warm rain fell from dark clouds gathering over the western forest. 4 seasons seemed to exist simultaneously. He looked toward the human camp. No one appeared surprised. One engineer was repairing flood barriers. Another checked wildfire pumps. A third adjusted cold weather shelters before nightfall. The commander finally understood why their equipment looked so ordinary. Nothing about it excelled in any single environment. Everything worked reasonably well in all of them. The humans had not come prepared for forests, or deserts, or mountains. They had come prepared for the possibility that by tomorrow the forest might become something else. Chapter 5, The Simulation. The expedition to KX-441 should have ended the debate. It did not. If anything, it made the arguments worse. The Forestry Directorate claimed its ecological models had prevented disaster. The Mountain Consortium argued that without understanding snowmelt, the expedition would have been destroyed before the floods. The Desert Engineering Guild pointed out that water storage and thermal management had kept everyone alive after the weather shifted. Every specialist left convinced they had been the decisive factor. The official report reflected all of those conclusions. The unofficial report was only 3 sentences long. It circulated quietly through the survey authority. Every specialist solved the problem they recognized. The humans recognized that every problem would become another problem. Recommendation: repeat under controlled conditions. 3 months later, the Galactic Academy announced the largest field exercise in its history. Officially, it was called an interoperability assessment. Everyone else called it the human test. Not because it had been designed by humans, because everyone expected the humans to fail it. The rules appeared simple. Each mixed species team would establish a permanent research station. The exercise would last 30 days. Everything required for survival would be available somewhere on the planet. No outside assistance, no orbital resupply, no emergency intervention unless lives were immediately at risk. The objective seemed straightforward: build a functioning colony. The specialists smiled. This was familiar territory. The forestry teams immediately searched for ideal timber. The desert engineers looked for mineral deposits. The mountain specialists claimed the ridgelines. The marine researchers established camps near the coast. Each group naturally gravitated toward the environment it understood best. The human contingent did something strange. They spent the first 2 days walking. Commander Iller found them studying maps instead of building. "You have wasted 48 hours. The human survey leader looked up. We are investing 48 hours. You haven't constructed anything. We are constructing a plan. The commander gestured toward the thriving specialist camps. They are already ahead. The humans smiled, for today. By the third day, the humans finally selected a location. The specialists immediately criticized it. Too far from the river, too close to the hills, not enough forest, poor agricultural soil, no obvious mineral deposits. The site seemed average. The human response was immediate. Exactly. One forestry scientist could not understand it. You intentionally chose the second-best location. No. The third. No. Then why settle here? The human pointed in every direction. The river is close enough. The mountains are close enough. The forest is close enough. The plains are close enough. The coast is reachable. The scientist frowned, but none of them are ideal. No. They are compromises. Yes. The scientist looked genuinely confused. Why would you build around compromise? The human looked toward the horizon, because environments do not stay ideal. The first week passed quietly. Several specialist camps outperformed the humans in every measurable category. The forestry station processed more lumber. The mountain teams produced stronger structures. The marine biologists gathered more food. The evaluation board recorded every metric. Human Camp 7 ranked 4th, nothing remarkable. Several instructors quietly wondered whether Earth had finally been overrated. Then the simulation changed. Without warning, the instructors introduced the first event, a severe storm. The forestry station lost half its timber stores to flooding. The mountain camp remained untouched. Human Camp 7 lost 2 storage sheds. By nightfall, repairs were already underway, not because the humans had built better structures, because replacement materials had already been stored somewhere else. The specialists noticed. You had duplicate supplies. The human quartermaster shrugged. We assumed we would lose something. 4 days later came the second event. A fungal blight devastated local crops. The agricultural specialists immediately began treating their fields. The humans harvested what remained. Then they switched to preserved food while relocating agriculture to higher ground. One botanist stared. You abandoned your crop. We changed crops. So quickly. We have done it before. By the middle of the exercise, something unusual began happening. Every specialist camp looked excellent until the scenario changed. The human camp never looked exceptional. It simply never stopped working. Commander Iller visited during the third week. The camp looked untidy, nothing matched. Buildings had obviously been expanded multiple times. Some walls were timber, others stone. Roofs differed from one structure to another. Storage areas had moved twice. Drainage channels had been redirected. The commander frowned. It looks unfinished. The human engineer laughed. It is. When will it be complete? She looked around. Probably never. That answer lingered with him. Every specialist civilization built toward completion. The perfect settlement, the ideal design, the final solution. The humans built something else. A settlement that expected to change. On the final day, the instructors gathered the performance reports. Every specialist team had dominated at least one category. Fastest construction, best agriculture, highest structural quality, most efficient resource extraction. Human Camp 7 won none of them. Yet when the scores were combined across the entire month, one result stunned the Academy. Human Camp 7 had accumulated the highest overall operational score in the history of the simulation. Not because the humans had been the best, because they had never needed to start over. One instructor quietly summarized the finding for the Academy archives. The specialists built for the world they found. He looked toward the human camp, where another drainage ditch was already being widened because someone had noticed rain clouds gathering over the mountains. The humans built for the world they expected to find tomorrow. Chapter 6, The Colony That Should Have Failed. The settlement survived its first month. The Academy considered that encouraging. The specialists considered it proof. The humans considered it the beginning. Survey World KX-441 officially became Colony Horizon on the 31st day. The temporary camps disappeared. Permanent foundations replaced them. Families arrived, schools followed, hospitals, workshops, power stations. The survey expedition ended. A civilization began. Commander Iller remained as colonial governor. It was, by every projection, an ideal assignment. The environmental surveys had been completed. The dangerous unknowns had been mapped. The specialists finally understood the planet, or so they believed. The first crisis arrived in the second year, not with an explosion, not with a storm, with numbers. Rainfall measurements across the western mountains dropped nearly 40%. The Forestry Directorate remained unconcerned. The reservoirs are full. The Agricultural Council agreed. Current crop yields remain excellent. The Hydrology Office estimated no immediate shortages. Every report reached the same conclusion. No action required. Governor Iller signed them all. Then he noticed one additional request, submitted by the Human Planning Office. Request authorization to begin voluntary water conservation measures. He frowned. The reservoirs were nearly full. The rivers still flowed. There was no emergency. He summoned the office director. A middle-aged human named Elena Torres entered carrying no reports. Only a map. You requested conservation. Yes. Why? She pointed toward the mountains, the snowpack. It was lighter. It was much lighter. The hydrologists already accounted for that. They accounted for this year. She nodded. I'm looking at next year. Governor Iller folded his hands. The reservoirs are currently at 92%. They are. Crop forecasts remain excellent. They do. So why inconvenience the colony? Elena rotated the map. I have a question. He waited. If next year is dry, she pointed toward the mountains, where does the water come from? He looked at the rivers, the reservoirs. And the year after that? Silence, she continued. If the mountains receive another light winter. Another pause, what then? The governor realized something uncomfortable. Every report he had approved described present conditions. The human report described trajectories, not where the colony stood, where it was heading. Conservation measures began quietly. Nothing dramatic, lower irrigation during the wettest weeks, additional reservoir construction, gray water recycling, new storage cisterns beneath every public building. Several council members complained. This is unnecessary. Elena nodded. I hope you're right. The second crisis arrived before anyone finished arguing about the first. An unfamiliar insect emerged from the southern wetlands. Within 2 weeks, it had spread across nearly a quarter of the colony's farmland. The Agricultural Council assembled immediately. Every specialist recommended treatment. Chemical suppression, biological controls, containment zones. The humans asked one question. What eats them? The room fell silent. One xenobiologist blinked. We haven't identified any predators. Keep looking. 3 days later, they found one. A small flying reptile native to the eastern forests. It consumed astonishing numbers of the insects. Unfortunately, it had never lived anywhere near the colony. A transportation officer frowned. You want to introduce predators? Elena shook her head. No. I want to restore the food chain. The insect population collapsed within weeks, not because humanity had invented a better pesticide, because they had assumed every problem belonged inside a larger system. The specialists began noticing a pattern. Whenever something failed, the humans rarely attacked the failure directly. They looked for the system around it. A failing reservoir meant studying mountains. A crop infestation meant studying forests. A bridge design required understanding floodplains. Nothing existed alone. Late that autumn, Governor Iller walked through Colony Horizon with Terk Saul, who had traveled from the academy to observe the settlement. The colony looked untidy. New drainage channels crossed older streets. Additional water tanks stood beside homes that already had plumbing. Greenhouses had been expanded 3 separate times. Some buildings now wore insulated exterior panels despite the pleasant weather. The governor sighed. It always looks under construction. Terk smiled. Does that bother you? A little. He looked toward a crew adding a second pipe beside a perfectly functional one. Some of those systems aren't broken. They are. Then why replace them? Before Terk could answer, Elena emerged from the construction site. We're not replacing them. The governor gestured toward the exposed pipes. It certainly appears that way. We're adding bypass lines. Why? In case one fails. It hasn't failed. She nodded. It will. The governor frowned. How can you know that? I don't. She smiled. I know something will. That answer lingered with him long after she walked away. Not this pipe, not this bridge, not this reservoir, something. The humans never predicted the exact failure. They assumed failure itself was inevitable. Then they asked a different question. What happens next? The answer arrived 6 months later, an earthquake, not catastrophic, not even particularly large. Most buildings survived. Most roads remained open. Only one section of the colony lost water. For 43 minutes. Then valves redirected the flow through the bypass system Alina's crews had installed. The hospital never noticed. Neither did the schools. Families continued cooking dinner. Children continued playing. The colony never stopped functioning. Governor Iller stood beside the repair crews watching water flow through pipes that technically had never been needed, until they were. He looked toward Alina. You knew. She shook her head. I hoped I was wasting everyone's time. You weren't. No. She watched engineers reconnect the damaged line. But I'd still rather build something people complain they never needed than explain afterward why I thought we could probably get away without it. That evening, Governor Iller updated the colony's operating philosophy. It was only one sentence, simple enough to fit above every engineering office, planning department, and emergency operations center. Do not build for the world that exists today. Build for the world that arrives tomorrow. For the first time since humans had joined the colony, no specialist objected, because tomorrow had already arrived. Chapter 7, The World That Changed Twice. For 5 years, Colony Horizon became the model every new settlement studied. Not because it was beautiful, it wasn't. Visitors often described it as unfinished. Roads curved where older maps showed straight lines. Reservoirs were larger than necessary. Buildings carried attachment points for additions that did not yet exist. Pipes disappeared into empty junction boxes. Electrical conduits ended behind removable wall panels. Everything looked temporary. Everything looked incomplete. Everything looked prepared. The specialists still found it mildly offensive. The humans considered it finished enough. Governor Iller had learned to recognize the difference. One morning, while reviewing the colony's expansion plans, he noticed a construction request from the Human Planning Office. It proposed widening the Eastern Road. Again, he sighed. We widened that road last year. Alina Torres nodded. We did. It isn't congested. It is. So why widen it? Alina walked to the colony map. Instead of pointing at the road, she pointed at a valley nearly 50 kilometers away. We found another freshwater basin. I know. The Geological Survey believes it's suitable for another settlement. I've read the report. She nodded. Where will their supplies come from? Governor Iller blinked. The new settlement. No. He stopped, then looked back toward Horizon. Oh. The road wasn't for Horizon anymore. It was for a colony that did not yet exist. Construction began the following week. Predictably, the Infrastructure Council objected. We are spending resources on traffic that doesn't exist. Alina agreed. Correct. That is wasteful. She smiled politely. It is called planning. The debate ended exactly 41 days later. A mining expedition discovered one of the richest deposits of superconductive crystal ever found within council space. In the valley Alina had pointed toward. Within a month, 6,000 workers arrived. Without the wider road, supplies would have taken weeks longer to reach them. Instead, traffic simply increased. The road accepted it without complaint. Governor Iller quietly crossed another argument off the list of things he would never again challenge humans about. Then the planet reminded everyone that it was still in charge. It began with the river, not flooding, not drying, moving. The western channel gradually shifted over the course of several weeks. Nothing dramatic. The current simply carved a new path. Engineers estimated the movement would continue. Eventually, the colony's primary reservoir would no longer receive enough water. Emergency meetings began immediately. The Hydrology Office proposed redirecting the river. The Environmental Council objected. The Agricultural Bureau wanted emergency pumping stations. The specialists once again searched for the perfect solution. The humans asked a different question. What is the river trying to do? The room fell silent. One hydrologist frowned. It isn't trying to do anything. No. Alina corrected herself. What direction does gravity want the river to flow? The models updated. The terrain projection changed. For nearly 2 hours, the specialists adjusted simulations. Eventually, the answer became obvious. The river had found an easier route. Every proposed engineering solution attempted to force it back. The humans suggested moving the reservoir instead. Governor Iller stared at the proposal. You want to relocate an entire reservoir? Eventually. That's enormous. So is fighting a river forever. Construction began before the arguments ended. Instead of reinforcing the old shoreline, the colony expanded toward the new one. Pipelines were rerouted, storage tanks repositioned, water treatment facilities redesigned. The work took months. Visitors thought the humans had become obsessed with rebuilding. In reality, they were simply moving with the landscape instead of arguing with it. Late one afternoon, Terk Saul arrived for another inspection. He found Governor Iller standing beside the old reservoir. The water level had fallen noticeably. You seem troubled, Terk observed. I've spent my entire career believing stability was the goal. And now? Iller watched workers dismantle equipment they had celebrated installing only 4 years earlier. Now I'm watching perfectly functional infrastructure being moved. Does it still bother you? The governor considered the question, then smiled a little. Terk laughed. It should. He looked toward the construction crews. The humans don't enjoy rebuilding. It sometimes seems like they do. They don't. What they enjoy is avoiding catastrophes. A sudden alarm interrupted them. Both men turned, not toward the river, toward the northern hills. A landslide, minor, no injuries. One maintenance road had disappeared beneath thousands of tons of loose earth. Governor Iller instinctively reached for the emergency response channel. Before he could issue an order, the notification updated. Alternate route activated. Travel delay 4 minutes. He looked at Alina. You built another road. We did. I don't remember approving it. You approved it 3 years ago. For emergencies. No. She smiled, for possibilities. That evening, Governor Iller reviewed every major infrastructure project completed since humanity had arrived. None had solved the immediate problem of the day. Everyone had quietly solved a problem that appeared months or years later. For the first time, he understood why human planning meetings seemed so unusual. Whenever specialists gathered, they asked one question: what is happening? Whenever humans gathered, they asked another: what happens after that? And then after that? And then what changes because of those changes? They built chains of possibilities instead of isolated answers. Near sunset, Governor Iller climbed the observation tower overlooking Colony Horizon. The settlement looked larger than ever. Messier than ever. Roads curved, buildings expanded, reservoirs shifted, construction cranes stood everywhere. 5 years ago, he would have called it disorganized. Now he saw something else. Not disorder, evolution. The colony wasn't unfinished. It was alive. Every season it became something slightly different from the season before. Every year it became better adapted to the planet beneath it. Not because the humans had mastered KX-441. Because they had accepted a truth every other civilization had spent millennia trying to ignore. A world that never stops changing can never be finished, so neither should the people who live on it. Chapter 8, The Inheritance. The breakthrough came from a failed experiment. For nearly 6 years, the Galactic Academy had searched for a biological explanation for human adaptability. The researchers began with the obvious possibilities: accelerated mutation, unusual neural plasticity, enhanced stress tolerance, broad-spectrum immune response, metabolic flexibility. Humans possessed modest advantages in several categories. None explained the scale of the result. A human raised in a coastal city could learn desert survival. A human born in the tropics could become an Arctic engineer. A child whose ancestors had lived beside rivers could grow into a mountain rescuer. No genetic transformation occurred. No evolutionary timescale passed. The individual simply learned. That should not have been remarkable. Every intelligent species learned. The problem was how much human learning could be transferred between environments, and how quickly. Senior xenobiologist Terk Saul returned to the academy to review the latest findings. The research team had prepared thousands of genetic comparisons. He ignored them. Instead, he asked one question: what did the humans already know before they arrived? The laboratory director frowned. That is not a biological measurement. No. We are studying adaptation. So am I. The director gestured toward the displays. We are attempting to identify the mechanism. Terk looked through the observation window. Beyond it, a human volunteer was completing a survival exercise inside an artificial tundra. The volunteer had never lived in a polar region, yet she had built a windbreak, insulated her shelter from the ground, protected her water from freezing, and recognized the first signs of cold injury. "How does she know any of that?" Terk asked. "She received training." "From whom?" "Human instructors." "And where did they learn it?" The director hesitated. "Other instructors." "And before them?" The answer continued backward. "Teacher, parent." Book, manual, expedition report, military doctrine, recorded disaster, traditional knowledge. Someone somewhere had once learned the lesson by surviving the mistake. Then humanity stored the answer. The research team had been looking inside the human body. The adaptation was sitting in the library. Terk called Governor Iller that evening. The governor appeared by projection from Colony Horizon with construction noise audible behind him. "You found something," Iller said. "I believe so." "Biological?" "No." The governor smiled. "That sounds human." Terk displayed 2 records. The first showed a specialist species adapting to a new environment. The change occurred across generations. Natural selection favored individuals who tolerated the conditions better. Over time, the population became more efficient, more specialized, less suited to environments it no longer encountered. The second record showed a human population entering the same environment. The first generation struggled. Some died, some left, some remained. They changed clothing, housing, food storage, tools, schedules, agriculture, medical practice. By the next generation, children inherited bodies nearly identical to those of their parents, but they inherited a completely different chance of survival. Iller studied the comparison. Their biology did not adapt. Not significantly. Their civilization did. Terk nodded. Humanity evolved twice, once through genes, once through memory. The second process moved far faster. At the academy, researchers began tracing human survival knowledge across history. The results became impossible to organize. Desert irrigation methods influenced cities thousands of kilometers away. Cold weather clothing designs crossed oceans. Navigation techniques developed by island cultures guided later planetary surveys. Agricultural practices migrated beyond the ecosystems that created them. Emergency medicine learned in wars saved civilians during earthquakes. Fire management developed by ancient communities reappeared in modern colony planning. Human knowledge did not remain inside its original environment. It traveled, it combined, it changed. A solution created for one problem often survived long enough to solve another. One researcher found a human flood control design based partly on techniques developed by civilizations separated by 4,000 years and half a planet. Another found modern wilderness training that preserved principles older than many galactic governments. The Academy had assumed human adaptability meant starting from nothing. It did not. Humans almost never started from nothing. They started with everyone who had failed before them. That realization changed the investigation. The researchers stopped asking how one human learned a new environment so quickly. They began asking how much invisible experience stood behind that human. The answer was staggering. A survey engineer arriving on an unfamiliar world carried lessons from sailors, farmers, hunters, builders, soldiers, physicians, and disaster survivors she had never met. Most were long dead. Some had never written their knowledge down. It survived in habits, procedures, warnings, design standards, stories, simple phrases repeated so often no one remembered their origin. Do not camp in a dry riverbed, never trust spring ice, store water in more than one place, watch the animals before a storm, build above the old flood mark, carry more than one way to make fire, tell someone where you are going. None sounded profound. That was because humanity had already paid the price required to make them obvious. Governor Iller invited the Academy team to Colony Horizon. He wanted them to see the process outside a laboratory. They arrived during preparations for the dry season. Human planners were reviewing wildfire routes. Forestry specialists studied fuel density. Engineers inspected water pumps. Medical teams updated evacuation plans. One researcher asked whether the colony expected a major fire. Elena Torres answered, "No." "Then why prepare?" "Because the conditions make one possible." "Has this settlement experienced one before?" "No." "Then where did the plan come from?" Elena handed him the document. It contained procedures adapted from Earth, from 3 other human colonies, and from a Vrax industrial fire 10 years earlier. The researcher scrolled through the references. These environments are unrelated. The fires are. That sentence reshaped another academy department. Humans categorized knowledge differently. Specialists organized information by environment. Desert knowledge, forest knowledge, ocean knowledge. Humans often organized it by problem: fire, cold, flood, isolation, contamination, structural failure. A solution could move between worlds if the underlying problem remained similar enough. That was why they seemed to improvise so quickly. Often they were not improvising, they were recognizing a new shape, an old problem, a stored answer. The final proof arrived when Colony Horizon faced a disease outbreak among livestock imported from 3 different ecosystems. No single veterinary specialist understood every species involved. The humans assembled a mixed team. They compared symptoms, mapped transmission, separated shared water sources, changed movement patterns, established quarantine zones. The method had not been invented for alien livestock. Its foundations came from centuries of human disease control. The outbreak ended before it reached the colony's food supply. The official report praised rapid adaptation. Elena corrected the wording. We were not rapid. The Academy observer looked confused. The response began within hours. The response began centuries ago. She pointed toward the procedures. We just happened to be the people holding the manual. That evening, Terk stood inside Colony Horizon's public archive. It was not a grand building. Most of the information existed in distributed systems. Repair logs, weather records, crop failures, medical reports. Personal accounts, maps showing where roads had washed out, notes explaining why a reservoir had been moved. Every success was recorded. More importantly, so was every mistake. Other civilizations preserved triumphs. Humans preserved warnings. Do not build there again. This design cracked in winter. That crop failed after the second drought. The evacuation route flooded. The backup system shared the same weakness as the primary. Someone reading those records years later might never know the people who had written them. They would still inherit the lesson. Terk understood then that human civilization possessed something larger than adaptability. It possessed accumulated adaptation. Each generation did not merely survive its own environment. It added what it learned to a growing inheritance, a library built from mistakes, a toolkit assembled across climates, a memory longer than any individual life. The galaxy had believed Earth forced every human generation to begin again. The opposite was true. Earth changed constantly. Humanity remembered constantly. And because the memory survived longer than the environment that created it, humans could arrive on a world they had never seen carrying answers to questions it had not asked yet. Chapter 9, the test no specialist wanted. The Academy changed its entrance examination the following year. Not the written portion, not the technical certifications, not the environmental survival tests every cadet expected. Those remained. Forest specialists still demonstrated forest survival. Desert engineers still crossed open sand. Cryogenic crews still built shelters beneath ice storms. The change came afterward. For the first time in Academy history, cadets were required to leave the environment they understood. The new assessment was called the Adaptive Operations Trial. Most cadets called it unfair. The humans called it Tuesday. Senior xenobiologist Terk Sol stood beside Governor Iller in the observation chamber while the first teams entered the simulation. This will be unpopular, Iller said. It already is. You created an examination designed to punish specialization. Terk shook his head. No. We created one that reveals its limits. That distinction will not comfort anyone who fails. No examination does. Below them, 40 mixed-species teams waited inside separate deployment chambers. Each team had received the same mission: establish a research outpost, maintain communications, collect environmental data, remain operational for 7 days. The cadets had been told the starting environment: a broad, temperate valley, mild weather, reliable water, stable soil, low predator activity. The kind of location almost any civilization would choose for settlement. They had not been told what came next. The chamber doors opened. The teams deployed. The first day proceeded exactly as expected. Forestry cadets built with local timber. Agricultural specialists planted rapid growth crops. Mountain engineers selected elevated ground. Desert technicians established efficient water storage despite the apparent abundance. The humans did not lead every team. That was intentional. The Academy wanted to know whether human methods could function without humans directing them. Some teams adopted the new doctrine. Others ignored it. The difference appeared immediately. Team 7 built the strongest station. Its core structural cadet designed foundations capable of surviving impacts far beyond anything in the valley. The walls were heavy. The roof was permanent. The station could have remained in place for a century. Team 12 built the most efficient station. Its Veyor systems specialist eliminated redundant equipment and reduced energy consumption by nearly 20%. Team 19 completed construction first. Its Talari logistics crew moved so quickly that their station became operational before several teams finished surveying. Team 26 took longer. Its site looked less impressive. The structures were modular. Supply caches were divided between 3 locations. Walkways could be removed and repositioned. Water came from 2 sources. No system operated at maximum efficiency. Every system had another way to function. The evaluation board ranked Team 26 near the bottom. Then the weather changed. The first event arrived on the second night. A simulated earthquake crossed the valley. The ground movement was moderate. No station collapsed. Team 7's foundations performed perfectly. Their heavy walls remained aligned. Their equipment suffered almost no damage. The core cadet accepted congratulations from his team. Then the river changed course. The earthquake had blocked the northern channel. Water began spreading across the valley floor. Team 7's station stood directly in its path. The structure was too heavy to move. The foundations designed to resist displacement now prevented relocation. The strongest station in the exercise became the first one abandoned. The core cadet stared at it from higher ground while floodwater climbed the outer walls. "The building survived," he said. His human teammate nodded. The location didn't. Team 12 handled the flood better. Its station stood on elevated ground. Its efficient water system continued functioning. Then the Academy introduced a contamination event. The team's single purification unit detected biological toxins and shut down. The Veyor specialist attempted repairs. The unit was not broken. It was protecting itself. "Activate the secondary system," the team leader ordered. "There isn't one." The leader stared. "Why?" "Redundant systems reduced efficiency." The specialist heard the answer as he spoke it. Team 12 spent the next 12 hours carrying water from another camp. Team 19 adapted quickly. The Talari logistics cadets moved supplies to higher ground before the flood arrived. Then the temperature dropped. The change was sudden. Cold air descended from the northern mountains. Rain became ice. The Talari had packed for speed. Their shelters were light. Their clothing was minimal. Their bodies, optimized for rapid movement in warm climates, lost heat quickly. The fastest team in the exercise became dependent on slower cadets carrying insulation from storage. Team 26 did not avoid the problems. Their lower supply cache flooded. One modular shelter cracked during the earthquake. Their primary purifier shut down after detecting contamination. 2 cadets developed mild cold stress, but the station remained operational. The team moved wall panels from the damaged shelter to reinforce the medical unit. They opened the second supply cache. They switched to the backup water source. They shortened exterior shifts and converted one equipment tent into a warming room. No single response was elegant. No specialist performed an extraordinary feat. They simply kept changing the plan. Governor Iller watched from the observation chamber. They still rank 9th in total performance. Terk checked the board, for now. By the 4th day, the valley no longer resembled the environment the cadets had entered. Floodwater covered the lower ground. Night temperatures remained below freezing. A fungal growth spread through damp storage areas. Predators displaced by the flood approached several camps. Communications became unreliable after ice accumulated on transmission towers. Every specialist encountered a problem outside the assumptions behind their original design. Some adapted. Some defended the original plan long after it had stopped working. That became the real test. The Academy had expected technical failures. Instead, it observed psychological ones. Cadets became attached to their solutions. The core builder refused to dismantle sections of his surviving station because the structure remained sound. The Veyor systems specialist kept repairing the efficient purification network instead of accepting a less efficient temporary system. A forestry cadet continued searching for usable timber after the flooded trees became too unstable to harvest safely. Their expertise had become a trap. They knew the correct answer. The environment had changed the question. Team 26 held a planning meeting every 6 hours. The first agenda item never changed. What assumptions are no longer true? On the 4th day, the answer was temperature. On the 5th, it was food. The fungal contamination had spread into their preserved supplies. The agricultural cadet recommended treating the storage area. The human-trained team leader asked a different question. How long will treatment take? 2 days. How much safe food remains? 31 hours. Then treatment does not solve the immediate problem. The team divided the issue. One group contained the fungus. Another located edible plants identified during the first survey. A marine cadet collected freshwater organisms from the expanded floodplain. The desert specialist redesigned the cooking system to reduce fuel use. None possessed enough knowledge alone. Together, they built a temporary food supply. One observer on the evaluation board frowned. They are using survival methods from incompatible environmental disciplines. Terk looked at him. Their hunger appears compatible. By the 6th day, Team 26 moved into first place, not because their station was the best. Most of it had been rebuilt twice, not because they completed the most research. They had suspended several studies to preserve personnel, not because they used resources efficiently. Their duplicate systems had consumed more supplies than Team 12's original design. They reached first place because they remained capable of performing the mission. Other teams had become excellent collections of damaged specialties. Team 26 had become something less impressive and more useful, a functioning group. The Academy introduced the final event before dawn on the 7th day, evacuation. A simulated volcanic eruption began beyond the northern ridge. Ash would reach the valley within 4 hours. Every team had to abandon its station, cross flooded terrain, ascend a mountain route, and reach an extraction point above the ash layer. The cadets protested. This was a settlement exercise. It was, the instructor replied. Our objective was to remain operational. It still is. You are changing the mission. The instructor looked at the darkening horizon. The planet changed it first. The specialist teams prepared for the environments they expected to cross. Mountain cadets took climbing gear. Marine specialists prepared for the floodwater. Cold-adapted species carried thermal equipment. Each selected the tools of its expertise. Team 26 did something slower. They laid every item in the central shelter. Then they packed for transitions, waterproof layers within cold-weather clothing, climbing equipment accessible without unloading food, medical supplies divided between 3 people, tools selected for more than one purpose. No one carried everything. Every critical capability existed in at least 2 packs. The evacuation began. The first section crossed floodwater. Marine specialists led. The second climbed unstable forest slopes. Forestry cadets identified safe routes. The third entered freezing wind above the tree line. Cold weather experts adjusted the pace. The final ascent required ropes. Mountain cadets secured the path. Team 26 was not first at any stage. It was never last. At each transition, the lead changed. The formation changed. Equipment changed hands. The team became a different team without becoming a different group. Halfway up the mountain, a Talari cadet from Team 19 collapsed from cold exposure. Her teammates had already moved ahead. Team 26 found her. The rules did not require them to help another team. The extraction clock continued counting down. Their human-trained leader looked at the remaining distance, then at the cadet. Redistribute loads. No debate followed. The Corps member carried the injured Talari. The desert specialist took part of the Corps' pack. The Marine cadet carried additional climbing equipment. The group slowed. They reached the extraction point with 6 minutes remaining, not first. 4 other teams had arrived before them. The Academy posted the final scores. Team 26 ranked first. Several cadets objected immediately. They arrived 5th. They carried another team's member, the chief evaluator said. That reduced their speed. Yes. Then how did they win? The evaluator displayed the scoring categories: personnel survival, mission continuity, resource adaptability, cross-environment performance, recovery from failed assumptions. Team 26 had dominated none individually. Its combined score exceeded every other team. The same pattern humanity had demonstrated for centuries. Never the best answer to one environment, the best chance of still having an answer after the environment changed. At the closing session, the cadets assembled beneath the Academy dome. Many looked exhausted. Some looked angry. A few looked thoughtful. Terk stood before them. The purpose of this examination was not to prove that specialists are obsolete. He displayed recordings from the evacuation. Marine cadets guiding teams through water. mountain specialists securing ropes, cold weather experts preventing exposure, forestry cadets finding stable ground. Without specialists, many of you would not have arrived. The next image showed Team 26 changing formation at the edge of each environment. The purpose was to prove that expertise has a boundary. He looked across the hall. The environment does not promise to stop there. One of the failed cadets raised a hand. Then what should we specialize in? Terk smiled, something. The answer surprised them. Become excellent. Learn everything your discipline can teach you. He gestured toward the projection of Earth rising behind him. Then learn how to put it down when the world needs something else. The hall became silent. The examination had not punished specialization. It had punished rigidity. That distinction became the foundation of the Academy's new doctrine. A specialist knew the best answer to a familiar problem. A generalist knew when the problem was no longer familiar. Humanity's advantage was not that every human knew every environment. They did not. It was that human civilization had learned to expect the handoff. The desert expert led in the desert. The sailor led at sea. The climber led on the mountain. And when the terrain changed, leadership changed with it. The galaxy had spent millennia asking which species was best suited to a world. The adaptive operations trial introduced a more useful question. What kind of team could survive when the world refused to remain one thing? Chapter 10, The Apex Trait. The phrase entered public use before the Academy approved it. Apex generalist. No researcher liked it. The word apex implied dominance, predators, food chains, competition. It suggested humans stood above every specialist species. The evidence showed the opposite. In deserts, humans lost to desert species. In oceans, they lost to aquatic species. In frozen environments, they lost to civilizations shaped by ice. Even on mountains, forests, and grasslands, there was almost always another species that performed better. Humanity was not the apex organism in any single environment, yet the phrase spread. Journalists used it. Politicians repeated it. Recruitment offices placed it on posters. Eventually, senior xenobiologist Terk was asked to explain it before the Galactic Assembly. He began by rejecting it. Humans are not apex generalists. A murmur moved through the chamber. The phrase had become so popular that several delegates appeared personally offended. Terk continued. At least not in the way most people mean it. Behind him, the assembly display filled with environmental rankings. Desert survival. Humans 5th, polar operations. Humans 4th, dense forest navigation. Humans 6th, high-altitude construction. Humans 3rd, marine logistics. Humans 4th, no first-place result appeared. Terk faced the delegates. An apex species dominates its environment. He changed the display. Earth appeared, deserts, glaciers, rainforests, mountain ranges, grasslands. Islands, wetlands, coastlines. No human population dominated all of this. He let the planet rotate. They endured parts of it. Adapted to parts of it. Abandoned parts of it. Returned later with better tools. A delegate from the ICE Consortium raised one hand. Then, why has humanity become indispensable to mixed environment operations? Because dominance was never the useful trait. Terk replaced Earth with a recording from the adaptive operations trial. A team crossed floodwater under the direction of a marine specialist. At the forest edge, leadership passed to another cadet. Above the snow line, it changed again. No argument, no delay, no shame. The human contribution was not superior environmental knowledge. Terk paused the recording at the exact moment the team reorganized. It was accepting that superiority could be temporary. The chamber quieted. Most civilizations built status around expertise. The forest specialist led in the forest. The ice specialist led on the ice. The desert specialist led in the desert. That arrangement worked until the environment changed. Then authority became a problem. Specialists often defended their role after the conditions justifying it had disappeared. Humans did that too. Their history contained no shortage of leaders who mistook yesterday's success for permanent wisdom. But humanity had also built habits that challenged it. Emergency command transferred when jurisdictions changed. Pilots yielded to mechanics when engines failed. Doctors listened to local guides during outbreaks. Engineers consulted farmers about soil. Soldiers deferred to firefighters inside burning structures. Not always, not perfectly, often only after expensive mistakes, but frequently enough that the principle survived. Expertise belonged to the problem, not permanently to the person. Governor Iller attended the assembly hearing from Colony Horizon. He had governed the settlement for nearly a decade. During that time, he had watched human planners surrender authority repeatedly. Elena Torres led water planning during the dry years, then stepped back when river specialists understood the new channel better. Human engineers designed modular settlements, then accepted changes proposed by core structural teams. Human emergency planners created evacuation routes, then rewrote them when Talari transport crews demonstrated faster movement patterns. The humans did not need to control every solution. They needed every solution to connect. That was the difference. Iller requested permission to address the chamber. Terk yielded the floor. The governor stood beneath the image of KX-441. When humans first arrived, Iller said, I believed they lacked confidence. Several delegates looked toward him. They rarely presented one final answer. They offered alternatives. They asked what might change. They built redundancies. They allowed other specialists to take command. He smiled faintly. I mistook flexibility for uncertainty. The display showed Colony Horizon over 10 years. The first settlement, the expanded roads, the relocated reservoir. The modular buildings, the secondary water lines, the changing farmland, no single design remained untouched. The colony looked less like a monument than a sequence of decisions. Iller continued. Every specialist civilization represented here values mastery. As it should. The core should master structures. The pelagic worlds should master oceans. The ice consortium should master cold. He looked toward the human delegation. Humanity mastered something else. The chamber waited. The transition. The word remained above the colony image. Not desert, not forest, not mountain. Transition. The moment the river moved, the moment the temperature dropped, the moment the crop failed, the moment the mission changed, the moment the best expert became the wrong expert. Humanity was not always better prepared for the environment. It was better prepared for the environment to stop being what everyone expected. That was the trait the phrase apex generalist had tried to describe. Not supremacy across every field. Competence across boundaries. The ability to remain useful while certainty disappeared. A delegate from a desert species objected. This still sounds like a claim of superiority. Terk returned to the center of the chamber. It is a claim of context. He displayed the desert rankings again. Place humans on your world and your people outperform them. The display changed to frozen terrain. Place them here and the ice consortium outperforms them. Then a floodplain, a mountain, a coastal storm. But move the mission through all 5. The combined results appeared. Human teams rose toward the top, not because they defeated every specialist, because they kept each specialist connected to the operation after the transition. The desert delegates studied the figures, so their advantage exists only when conditions change. Terk smiled, yes. The delegate looked toward the rotating map of known space. Colonies expanded, trade routes crossed climates. Exploration fleets entered unknown systems. Terraforming projects altered planets faster than evolution could respond. Disasters moved populations across worlds. Conditions changed everywhere. The delegates slowly leaned back. That is an inconvenient limitation. For everyone else, Terk said, the hearing ended with no official declaration. The assembly refused to classify humanity as an apex species. The scientists considered that correct. The public continued using the phrase anyway. Over time, its meaning changed. It stopped meaning that humans were best everywhere. It came to mean that they could go almost anywhere, become useful quickly, learn from whoever understood the place better, and remain useful when the place changed. Colony Horizon adopted the term last. A metal plaque appeared beside the entrance to its planning office. Elena Torres found it during her morning inspection. Human Adaptive Operations, Apex Generalist Division. She stared at it for several seconds, then removed the second line. Governor Iller found her carrying the plaque toward recycling. You object to the title? Yes. Why? It makes it sound like we do everything. Do you not? Elena stopped. Around them, a core engineer inspected a bridge. A pelagic hydrologist reviewed the new reservoir. Talari logistics crews mapped transport routes. Human planners moved between all 3 groups. No, she said. We make sure everything still works together when the plan changes. Iller looked toward the settlement. Construction continued in 6 districts. The river followed its new course. Greenhouses replaced fields damaged by drought. An old road had become a flood channel. A newer road curved toward a community that had not existed 5 years earlier. "What would you call that?" he asked. Elena considered, then shrugged. "Keeping up." She continued toward recycling. The governor watched her go. Humanity had crossed deserts, oceans, forests, ice fields, and mountains. It had settled worlds that no single specialist civilization wanted to classify. It had accumulated thousands of methods for surviving places where it did not naturally belong. And after all of that, humans still described their defining trait as keeping up. Perhaps that was why the trait remained useful. The moment a civilization believed it had finally mastered change was usually the moment it stopped adapting. Humanity had learned not to trust that moment. Earth had cured them of it long ago. Chapter 11, The Habit. 32 years later, no one remembered when the arguments had stopped. There had been no great declaration, no treaty, no unanimous vote by the Galactic Assembly. The change had happened the way civilizations usually changed, quietly, one practical decision at a time. The colony ship Endeavor's promise settled into orbit around Survey World Aster 19. Initial scans had already frustrated the Exploration Bureau. The northern hemisphere was dominated by forests. The equatorial belt held expanding deserts. Mountain glaciers fed seasonal floodplains. Violent coastal storms circled the Western Ocean. 3 tectonic plates met beneath the southern continent. The environmental reports disagreed with one another. Again, 50 years earlier, 7 different ministries would have begun arguing over jurisdiction. This time, the governor simply smiled. "Who's leading the expedition?" The question came from one of the younger administrators. Governor Selene Mar looked around the planning room. No one. The room became quiet. She corrected herself, not all the time. She touched the mission display. "When we're crossing glaciers." She nodded toward the cryonic corps commander. "You lead." The display shifted. "When we're surveying reefs." The pelagic specialists acknowledged the assignment. She continued. "When we're climbing." "When we're farming." "When we're containing fires." "When we're building." Leadership moved around the table. No one objected. No one felt diminished. The position belonged to the problem, not the person. A junior logistics officer frowned. "And if everything happens at once?" The governor smiled. "Then we stop asking who is in charge." She enlarged the planetary map. "We ask." Her finger traced the changing weather fronts. "What changes first?" Several veterans around the room nodded immediately. The younger officers quietly wrote it down. The colony landed 3 weeks later. Veteran observers from the Galactic Academy watched every decision. They recognized familiar patterns immediately. The buildings were modular. Power systems had independent backups. Roads ended in expansion corridors. Reservoirs included unused connections for future pipelines. Nothing appeared optimized. Everything appeared adaptable. One visiting professor chuckled. "They're building like humans." An elderly voice answered from behind him. "No. They're building like themselves." Professor Terksal leaned on his walking cane as he watched the construction crews. Age had silvered his hair. His movements had slowed. His curiosity had not. The academy had insisted he attend. After all, his lecture on Earth had become required reading throughout known space. He found the attention faintly embarrassing. The first emergency came exactly 12 days after landing. Heavy rainfall in the mountains, nothing unusual, until a minor earthquake redirected runoff into a valley where no river had existed the week before. The flood struck shortly after dawn. The academy observers instinctively reached for emergency communication channels. Then stopped. No alarms sounded. No shouting. No panic. The colony simply changed. Bridge crews abandoned unfinished construction and became flood engineers. Agricultural drones began mapping water movement instead of crop health. Medical teams relocated to higher ground before anyone ordered them to. Supply vehicles rerouted automatically. Portable water systems activated. The evacuation routes had already been marked during the first week. Children walked them as calmly as school fire drills. One observer whispered, "They've rehearsed this." Governor Mar overheard him. "No." She watched another team reposition modular flood barriers. "They've rehearsed changing." By evening, the water had begun to recede. Damage reports arrived. 3 storage buildings lost, 2 roads washed out, minor equipment losses, no fatalities, no serious injuries. The observers looked stunned. One finally approached Terk. How did they know exactly what to do? Terk smiled. They didn't. The observer blinked. They looked perfectly organized. They were. But no one predicted this flood. No. Terk looked toward the valley. They predicted they would eventually be wrong. The young observer considered that, so all of this. He gestured toward the colony, comes from humanity. Terk was quiet for several moments, then he slowly shook his head. It started there. He watched a pelagic engineer teaching a core construction crew how to reinforce a damaged bridge, while a human surveyor updated flood maps nearby. But it doesn't belong to humanity anymore. The observer looked across the settlement. Mixed species teams worked without hesitation. Leadership shifted naturally as each new problem appeared. Nobody defended yesterday's plan. Nobody mourned infrastructure that no longer fit the landscape. They simply adapted. That evening, Governor Marr invited Terk to the colony's small archive. It occupied only a single room. The shelves were nearly empty. For now, a young archivist carefully labeled the day's reports. Flood response initial settlement. Road relocation Northern Valley. Bridge reinforcement revision 1. The observer smiled. You document everything. The archivist looked genuinely confused. Of course. For history. She shook her head. For whoever gets this problem next. Terk stood silently. For a moment, he was back inside the Academy lecture hall decades earlier, watching bewildered cadets stare at a blue world that refused to fit their charts. They had believed Earth's greatest gift to humanity was hardship. They had been wrong. Hardship alone taught nothing. The gift had been memory, each generation refusing to let the next pay the same price twice. As the colony settled into the evening, children laughed outside beneath temporary floodlights. Workers already discussed how tomorrow's road would follow the river's new course instead of the old one. No one spoke about rebuilding exactly what had been lost. They spoke only about building what would work next. Terk smiled. At last, he understood the question that had followed him throughout his career. People had always asked what made humans different. It had never been deserts, or forests, or mountains, or oceans. It had not even been adaptation. It had been the quiet decision repeated across thousands of years to leave behind a better answer than the one they inherited. He looked once more at the young colony, already changing, already learning, already writing lessons for people who had not yet been born. Most civilizations mastered the world that created them. Humanity learned to master the moment the world changed. In time, the rest of the galaxy learned that habit as well.